friends, my name is Joy. I'm a self-love enthusiast, fashion designer, blogger, and creator of Made with Joy. I am here today so I can teach you guys how to make woven face mask. Just like this one. First, you're gonna need to have a tape measure. So let's measure the top of your nose to the bottom of your chin. For most people, that is 6 inches. Okay, so remember that part. That's going to be the measurement of the height of your mask. From here, the top of your nose, same part, to the side, measure the side of your face on how wide you want your face mask to be. And for most people, that's 4.5. So remember that. So it's 6 by 4.5. Height is how tall you want your face mask. 4.5 is the width, okay? So now that we have those two measurements, we can now make the pattern. But before we go ahead and do that, let's talk about the woven face mask. What is the difference between the woven face mask and the knit face mask that we made from the first video? So pretty much, it's what it's made out of. It's made out of wovens, and wovens do not have the stretch that knits do. So they don't have that much give. They're definitely more sturdy. They're more structured. But component-wise, it's pretty much similar. They both have 2 strings. It has a self, and then it also has the lining inside where you can put the HEPA filter in. And fit-wise, they fit a bit differently. It doesn't have that much give, but it hugs your face enough and covers the parts that needs to be covered on the sides. And I personally think that, woven fabrics have cuter prints, and that's the reason why I like them. Also, sewing wise, I feel like it's easier for me to sew wovens. They don't slip out of my hands. At a certain point when I sew knits, I feel like, I don't know, they just kind of slip away. And wovens, they don't. So and maybe because you guys wanted to know how to make a woven pattern, and that's the only fabrics that you guys have, and you don't have it in knit. So I just want to make sure that I can teach you guys the 2 different ways how to make face masks. First, make a straight line and measure 6 inches. This is your height. At the middle of 6 inches, which is 3 inches, make a line across for 4.5 inches. This is the width of your face. From there, make another straight line and measure 2 inches above and 2 inches below, with a total of 4 inches. From the line that you made for your side seams, connect it to your center front seam at the top and at the bottom. From your center front seam, measure 1 inch on your side seam, mark it, and freehand draw a curve that meets the center point mark of your center front seam. Do the same thing at the bottom, but measure 1/2 inch on the side seam and freehand draw a curve that meets the center point mark up. This is to draw the shape of your face. Adjust it based on your face. At the center of the line that connects your side seam and center front seam, mark a 1/4 inch and make a curved shape instead. This is for a better shape for your chin. Now connect from 0 on your side seam and 0 on your center front seam. And erase the original line and use the curvy line instead. Erase all the other lines that you no longer need. Now let's go ahead and make our dart. From the side seam line, measure 2 inches and mark that and circle it. Measure 1/2 inch up and 1/2 inch down and mark your notches. It should look like a triangle. Now let's add our seam allowance. Measure 1/4 inch on your center front seam and add your seam allowance. Do the same thing on the top of your mask. Add 1/4 inch seam allowance. And the same thing for the bottom of your mask. Add a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Don't forget to mark your notches if you didn't do it earlier. Now for your side seam, we are going to add 1/2 inch of seam allowance. And now we just have to connect them together. You don't have to do this, but I like to mark how many inches each line is for my pattern. 6 inch for center front, 4.5 for the width, and 2 inch for my darts. Transfer your notches to your seam allowance line if you have not done that. Now this is important. Add 2 notches on the bottom line of your mask. That's how you know when you're sewing where the top part is versus the bottom part. On the top of your mask, mark 1 notch. That's again how you can tell the difference between the two. For the rest, I just wrote how much each seam allowance should be. 1/2 inch on the side seam and 1/4 inch for the rest. Here's a close-up look of what your pattern should look like. Don't forget to label your pattern and write woven pattern face mask and write 2 and circle it so you know that you have to cut 2 of these. Now we just have to cut our pattern and get ready to make our lining pattern. If you guys have a tape, it's easier to do this with tape, even though I seem to be struggling with this tape. Now tape your woven pattern on top of another paper very carefully to make sure that it does not move. Use your tracing wheel, trace your pattern without the side seams. Again, without the side seams. It is important that the lining pattern is smaller than the self pattern. Make sure you get everything, the darts and the notches too, and transfer the dot of your darts using your awl. Now take off the tape and trace your lining pattern very carefully. I like to start with the dart, circle it, and draw its legs. Now draw the shape of your lining pattern. Draw your notches too. If you have the curvy ruler, use that to perfect your lines. Now measure 3.5 on the top of your pattern and use that as a mark for your side seam line. Label your pattern woven lining pattern and write 2 and circle it to indicate that you will need to cut 2 of these. Now you can cut your pattern and redraw your notches for your darts. Now it's time to pin our pattern to our fabrics. Grab your super cute self fabric and put your pattern on top and pin it. Pin, pin, pin. Now it's time to cut our fabrics. As I'm making a lot of these for donations and for the public, I normally like to stack my fabrics and cut them together to be more efficient. Don't forget to also cut your notches. And for your lining, if you're just making this for one mask, I like to fold my fabric in half, pin it, and cut away. Again, do not forget to cut your notches. Now we are almost my favorite part, sewing! But before we do that, we have to take off our pins. And oops, I almost forgot an important step. Use your awl to mark your dots. Make sure it sticks all the way through all the fabrics. Now keep taking off your pins and let's get to sewing. Time to sew. I use an overlock machine to overlock my center front seams. Start with your self, cut all the ends, then the lining, this is optional if you want cleaner ends. I like to overlock the side seams of my lining, but it's totally up to you. Now it's time to sew our darts together. Find your notches on your side seams of the self and sew it just a little past the hole that you made. Then do the same thing for the other end and do the same thing for your lining. Here is an extra step that we have to do when sewing woven garments. We have to press, press, press. Press your darts facing down at the bottom and do the same thing for your lining. Now, I don't like to see seams for mine, so this is optional, totally up to you.
but I like to fold mine 1/2 inch of my side seams of the lining, and I press that very carefully. I also like to press my center front seams, now grabbing the self and the lining, meet the center front together, and now we are ready to sew! Now grab your self fabric and lining and sew the top part together. Make sure that the side seam stays folded so that you won't see the threads later. Now do the same thing for the bottom part. We can now do our top stitch, but before that, grab your mask inside out, start with folding yourself 1/4 inch, and sew on top of the seam allowance, along with your lining. Sewing it together with the self, this will give your mask a more finished look and it will make it last longer after many washes. Do the same thing for the bottom part. Now let's clean the side seams of our self and overlock it. Again, this is optional, totally up to you. Now for the last step, cut 7 inches of your 1/4 inch elastic and fold your side seams for about 1/2 inch, and sew the elastic and side seams together for about 3/4 on the top, then sew all the way through and connect it at the bottom, and do the same thing on the other side.
Hi guys, so if you made it this far, that means you made your very own face mask. So congratulations. What did you guys think? I want to give you guys the close-up of this face mask just in case you have some questions on how yours is supposed to look. That's the outside, and now this is the lining part. See how I folded it right there because I like mine to be clean. And then the top stitch part right here. There you go, and then the elastic. Should be pretty easy, right? So I hope this video was helpful. Let me know which, face mask you guys like more. The first one with a knit or this one with the woven. If you guys have any questions, feel free to leave a comment below, or you can always follow me on Instagram, DM me. I'm there more often. But yeah, stay safe out there, you guys. Be well.